Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Middle East update. It's the week of October 2nd. And just a reminder, you want to make sure you get the PDF PowerPoint that accompanies this YouTube presentation. And with that, let's jump right into what we call our Newsbites. In Syria, the question really is, this is amazing. Is Syria ready to resume peace talks with Israel? When we talk about the Abrahamic Accord, we talk about normalizations. Interesting that a Syrian journalist considered very close to the Damascus regime claims that President Bashar Assad recently has asked senior Russian officials to contact Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu directly in order to begin negotiations for peace. Wow, who would have thought that? Arab aid for the Palestinian Authority. We've talked about this over the last couple weeks, but now we're getting the facts. It's plummeted by as much as 85% in 2020. That, coupled with the slump in other foreign funding, this has resulted in the Palestinian Authority's coffers shrinking by some 70%. The people probably won't notice it, but maybe the pockets of Mahmoud Abbas and others will. And then we have Ilhan Omar. She's being nailed for allegedly being involved in and possibly even running an illegal voting racket in her district in Minnesota. I'm not sure what's going to become of it, but it's in the news, and we thought we would report it because this whole voting ballot thing, we're going to hear a whole lot more about it, and not just in the state of Minnesota. Apparently she was selling ballots or paying Somalians money to make sure that they vote. We'll see what's going to transpire with that. Now, let's take a look at what we call the new Middle East. It's a brand new ball game. Within the span of, it's been a month, the United States has brokered peace agreements between Israel and two major Arab players. First, the United Arab Emirates, and then Bahrain. But both deals are truly revolutionary in scope. They've normalized trades. They put it this way: by normalizing these ties, they're focusing on business, trade, and travel. These are what we call warm agreements, and they go far beyond the cold peace that Israel made years ago with both Egypt and Jordan. And so not only do these deals set the stage for massive change among the Arab-Israeli relationships, but they might even present a novel opportunity to finally solve the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And then we have the news of COVID. A couple articles here. Israel currently, we know tomorrow is the beginning of Sukkot. But right now, Israel is in a massive shutdown. New statistics published by the IDF, their task force, finds that Israel's daily confirmed cases are now the highest in the world relative to population. Part of the issue is that the Orthodox as well as the Arab population is pretty much ignoring any of the restrictions that the government is putting down. A friend of mine in Israel, a close friend of mine, just sent me an email this week. We kind of went back and forth, and I says, gosh, it's just crazy here. And what are you seeing? What's happening in Israel? And he says, you're right. It's crazy here as well. The political atmosphere is toxic. Does that ring a bell? everything becomes way more extreme, and nobody thinks anymore about common ground, shared needs, or background. And so you have both the Orthodox as well as the Arab population completely ignoring the COVID-19 restrictions that the government is attempting to do. There's a picture here in the next slide that's dealing with the Orthodox. And again, with Sukkot coming on, basically, let me give you a quick rundown. Sukkot, 8-day feast. You build sukkahs, you're outdoors. You'll see in this picture a pretty large sukkah, and I don't see social distancing here. So you can understand that there's probably going to be a continual rise in COVID cases due just to this feast alone. I'm not sure what's going to happen, because many times the Israeli population looks at the Orthodox in disdain, and Benjamin Netanyahu needs the Orthodox or uses the Orthodox support in the government, so it's not likely that he will give them any over restrictions, if you know what I mean. So, but yet we're going to see a continual rise of COVID cases in Israel. It's just got to be a matter of time, whether it's a herd immunity. I don't want to really go down this road because it's not a presentation on COVID, but I have a feeling that after our elections, at some point in time, we're all going to just have to learn how to deal with living in the age of COVID, and not necessarily just cowering to it and shutting down economies and things such as that. I don't know when that'll happen, but my guess is it's going to be sometime after our election. So that's what's taken place in Israel at this time. Now let's look north. Let's look at the Hezbollah in Lebanon. The IDF has now, in a sense, they revealed coordinates of Hezbollah's Beirut missile depots. Sites that will produce precision-guided missiles. They lurk. Where do you think they put them? You probably are guessing. One's near a church, one's near a hospital, one's near a mosque. It's Hezbollah's strategy to hide their weapons inside of civilian neighborhoods. The massive explosion that took place in Beirut, in the port, typical of Hezbollah. And so the IDF is just, Bibi just went at the United Nations, showed these pictures and said, you know what, the world, the international community has to be outraged. Hezbollah should not be able to store weapons in civilian areas and risk the lives of Lebanese people. Basically, these are people that are being used as human shields. So again, it's not like Israel doesn't know where they're at, but if anything ever were to happen, they're putting Israel in sort of the back into the corner that if they take out these depots, there's going to be collateral damage. And that's what it's all about for them. Fake news. Take a look at this picture. Yesterday marked 20 years since this image appeared all over the media, leading to the creation of a news site that I highly recommend called Honest Reporting. And the caption on this from the New York Times read, quote, an Israeli policeman and a Palestinian on the Temple Mount. But the New York Times could not be more wrong. In reality, this picture is a victim of a Jewish American yeshiva student whose name was Tuvia Grossman, who had been pulled from a taxi in Jerusalem by an Arab mob, was severely beaten. This policeman was a Druze Israeli named Gideon Zafati, who was protecting Tuvia from this attacking mob. So when we think of false or fake news, take a look at this. And this is the sort of thing we can't believe our ears. We can't believe what the media reports. It's a sad day in which we live, that the media no longer wants to seek to inform us, but wants to shape our opinions. And then as we come to the end, the last one, last article here, Nazis in Redwood. It's hard to believe Northern California, an Instagram account that was associated with Redwood High School students that named specific Jewish students in Marin community was unearthed earlier this month. The account's followers were encouraged to contribute additional Jewish names to a Google document. The Instagram account, since been removed by the way, was named Redwood Students Organized Against Semitism and was accompanied by an anti-Semitic caricature. We're currently composing a Google document of Jews in our district. Hit us up if you want help. And the response, a Jewish student, we're frightened because our names could be on that list. Her name's Glickman. She said the list of Jewish students paired with this image of a swastika and a bullet produces an uncanny resemblance to the use of lists during the Nazi regime. The idea of going back to school with a student whose belief aligns with those Nazis is inconceivable to us. Right in our own backyard. Well, as I mentioned, we have a feast coming up. It's 8 days, and it's Sukkot, that is. And the bottom line on this feast is that we're commanded to be joyful. So remember, happy are the people whose God is the Lord. And as we've come through this intense period of leading up to Yom Kippur, in which it was a time of introspection and repentance and confession, we now accept what Jesus has done for us, and now we live in the joy of our salvation. So have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Shalom.